G'day guys, Will here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to our brand new video series on building the ultimate gaming or the ultimate sim racing PC more specifically. So as you guys that have been watching the channel for a while now would know, I actually already have a pretty high-end machine that I've been using to run my setup for my sim racing, all my gaming, as well as recording and editing all my videos as well. And it's also my daily driver for my various other work that I do as well. So it's a sort of an all-purpose, all-rounder machine. Now, one of the limitations that I've been finding recently since I upgraded to the triple 35-inch screens with a massive resolution of 10320 by 1440 is that when I'm trying to record or stream or anything like that, I'm running into what I like to call frame skips, where it's not necessarily a problem with overall frame rate. I'm able to run sort of 75 to 100 frames per second without too much of a drama at relatively high visual quality settings. But what's happening is I'm running into some sort of a bottleneck where the CPU kind of locks up and the frame rate basically drops to 0 for about a second and then it comes good again. And obviously if you're turning into a corner or you're in a battle with somebody in a gunfight or something like that, you can't have that sort of thing going on, as well as the fact that it makes the streams and the videos as well look kind of unprofessional. So the aim or the reason why I'm actually building this PC is basically as a dedicated gaming and sim racing PC. So the games themselves will be running on this rig, and then all of the recording and things like that will be happening on the other machines. So it's going to end up being a 2 PC setup, basically this driving the game and the other PC driving all the cameras, the recording, the streaming and everything like that. So the hope and the aim is that I'm going to not only be able to run at better visual quality settings, but we're not going to have all those problems with our recording and streams that we've been having over the last couple of months. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to cover just before we get kicking on this video. The first being that I have paid full retail for absolutely everything that you see in front of me on this table. So I was actually in discussions with EK Water Blocks as well as a couple of other brands as well. And they did actually offer to send me a bunch of stuff for free in exchange for making these videos and sharing their products. But I decided ultimately that I wanted to pay for everything out of my own pocket simply because I wanted to have complete freedom in what I was saying to you guys. I want to be able to tell you if I think that something isn't as good as it should be, or if something's overpriced, or any problems that I run into throughout this video series. And I thought the best way to be able to do that and be completely genuine and transparent with you guys is if I just fork out and pay for everything out of my own pocket. So I did just want to make that clear from the onset. Now, the other thing that I also want to tell you guys is that obviously everything that you see in front of me here is extremely expensive. This is about a $7,500 Australian build. Now, you don't need to go to this extent for your own PC. Basically, what I'm doing here is I wanted to make this a visually appealing machine. I wanted it to look really extreme, and I was happy to spend a little bit of extra money to make something that looked absolutely awesome, because I think that's better for the channel. You guys obviously want to see cool stuff, and the whole theme of this channel is building stuff that is, kind of over the top and kind of extreme. So a lot of what I'm doing here is, I wouldn't say, well, it kind of probably is a little bit unnecessary, but what I really want to do throughout this video series is explain the areas where I've gone a little bit overboard, the areas where I've done overkill, and really, the areas where you want to be spending the money as opposed to saving a little bit of cash to build the best system for your specific needs. Now, also, because I'm running such a massive resolution through my triple screen monitor setup as well, I'm having to buy high-end gear just to kind of drive that. If you're running a single monitor at 1440 or something like that, or even some of the cheaper VR headsets that don't push massive resolutions, you definitely don't need to go to the extent that I'm going to here to get a system that's going to work for your needs. So don't be scared off by the price tag. The aim of this is to basically build the coolest system I can possibly afford, share the experience with you guys, and hopefully you guys will learn a lot throughout the process as well. So the point of this video in particular is to run you through all of the components that you see on the table in front of me here. We're not going to go into a massive level of detail in this video. I just want to basically skim over everything, let you know the reasons why I've chosen the specific components that I have, and then we'll dive into each of the components in more detail throughout the build. So if there's anything in particular that you guys would like more detail on, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to include that in the videos. We're definitely going to be diving into this case and talking you through the ins and outs of that, the things that I like about it, the things that I don't like about it, and the reasons why I've chosen that. We'll look at the motherboard, we'll look at the power supply, obviously the graphics card, all of the water cooling stuff as well we'll cover in detail, putting it all together, how to do custom hardline bending of pipes and all that sort of stuff, how to choose the right radiators, the right fans, all that kind of thing will all be covered in this video series. So without further ado, let's take a look at all of the components that we've chosen for this build. Okay, so I'm sure the first thing that a lot of you guys have noticed is the 9900K that is sitting on the desk in front of me. Now, I'm sure given the situation at the moment with the whole Intel versus AMD situation, and a lot of people sort of saying there's absolutely no reason to buy Intel right now, a lot of you are probably wondering why on earth I've chosen a 9900K over something like a 3900X, or even waiting for the 3950X to come out in a couple of months' time. Now, I did actually wait for about 3 months. As soon as I heard that these new Ryzen processors were coming out, I did wait because I wanted to see exactly how they were going to perform and whether they were going to be the better choice for me. Now, it's important here to understand that this is a dedicated gaming and sim racing PC. So this is going to be responsible solely for running the games and the sims and things like that. It's not going to be handling any recording, any video processing, nothing like that. So I wanted to make sure I was choosing the right components for that specific need. Now, if you are looking at building an all-rounder PC, then I would definitely say that at this point in time, the Ryzen processors are probably a better choice. The 3900X or the 3950X when it comes out in a couple of months' time are definitely a better processor for all round. They perform better for things like video processing and stuff like that. But in terms of pushing raw frame rates, the 9900K is still the best processor on the market as of right now. So that is the reason why I've chosen that specific processor. Obviously, the motherboard that goes along with that as well, I've chosen the Maximus 11 Hero. Now, the reason why I've chosen that motherboard specifically is that it does allow for quite high-end overclocking, but it's not at the level of the Extreme Edition motherboard. Now, I know that this is probably one of the areas that you're thinking, why is he, he's spent all of this money on all this gear and then he's gone for a not absolutely top spec motherboard. Now, it's important to understand when you're choosing a motherboard that you can go way overboard and you can spend a lot more money than you need to. Now, the Extreme Edition in the Maximus range is almost double the price of the Hero board that I have here. And the only real advantage of that in the, in the real world is that if you're wanting to do extreme overclocking on liquid nitrogen and things like that, it allows you to push your processor to the absolute limits. Whereas the, the VRM quality and a couple of other little bits and pieces on this motherboard are a little bit of a compromise. But that said, for the purpose of this build, there was absolutely no reason to go to that extreme. We're not going to be liquid nitrogen cooling or anything like that. We're going to be running a very high-end custom loop, but I'm absolutely confident that the Hero board will give us the ability to push the processor to the limits without being a bottleneck in and of itself. So the limitations that we're going to have here are going to be voltage related with the CPU itself, whether or not we've got a good chip, and cooling related as well. And without going into liquid nitrogen, we're really not going to be taking full advantage of one of these extreme motherboards that cost almost double. So that is the reason why I've chosen a Maximus 11 Hero. I also don't need Wi-Fi on this machine as well, which is why I've chosen the Hero specifically. So again, just sort of trying to save money where I can to make sure that I'm building exactly what I need for the specific purpose. This is going to be running off a gigabit LAN connection. It's never going to be running off Wi-Fi, so there was no point in spending extra on a motherboard that was suitable for that. Now, the power supply, let's have a quick look at that. We've got the AX1200i power supply. Now, this is an area where I was willing to spend a little bit more money than I perhaps needed to. I wanted to have a power supply that I knew was absolutely capable of running all the components that are going to be in this system for long periods of time without generating excessive temperatures. So when you're choosing a power supply, you want to choose one that is going to be matched to the power draw of your system. And this system in total is going to end up being sort of around the sort of 700 to 900 watt range. But you also want to be running within the efficiency range of the power supply that you've chosen as well. So if you've got a system that's going to be running 900 watts under maximum load, you don't want to have a 900 watt power supply because that's going to be running towards the higher end of its efficiency. It's going to be generating more heat and therefore running less efficiently. So we want to make sure that we're choosing a power supply that's going to be able to handle the amount of power that we're consuming with relative ease. And that's the reason why I've chosen the AX1200i. I also wanted to make sure that the power supply was able to hold its voltages at very, very, very tight tolerances, so we don't get that sort of dirty power that we sometimes get with cheaper power supplies that can lead to, game crashes, lag spikes, and stuff like that. So we want to make sure that this machine is as stable as possible, and spending a little bit of extra money on a power supply is a good way to achieve that. onto the graphics card now. You can see we've got the Aorus Extreme GeForce RTX 2080 Ti. Now that is the graphics card that I already installed a water block on a couple of weeks ago and installed into my existing PC. So the aim here is to run this graphics card in this machine, and then the 1080 Ti that I had previously will be going into my old machine for recording and video editing and things like that. Now, as I mentioned in the video that I did on that graphics card already, you can check that out in the link above my head now. So there are a couple of reasons why I chose that graphics card specifically. It had 3 DisplayPort outputs as well as an HDMI and a USB-C output. So I'm able to run all of the monitors that I want in the configuration that I want straight out of the box. It's also factory overclocked as well. So it runs a higher base clock of, I think it was 1770 megahertz straight out of the box. And I was actually able to overclock that to about 1850 without any trouble whatsoever. So that was all good. Now, it was also one of the cards that had a water block from EK available for it as well. And that was another reason why I chose that card as well. But we'll have a look at the card in a lot more detail. I'll show you the overclocking and everything like that once we've got the PC all up and running. All right, so next component, the Samsung 970 Pro NVMe M2 VNAND SSD. So the reason why I've gone with that specifically, I wanted to have the fastest SSD I could possibly get my hands on. Obviously, we want to have the games loading nice and quickly. We don't want to have any bottlenecks in terms of read and write to a storage device. Now, I went with 1 terabyte simply because, I'm not going to be recording any video or anything like that on this machine. I just wanted to have enough storage that I could store all of the games that I want to play, all of the sims that I want to play without, having to copy things across to other drives and things like that. So that is the reason why I've chosen that one. So moving on to the RAM now, which I think is sitting just there. We've got G.Skill Trident Z, 32 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz CAS16 RAM. So again, this is a good sort of middle ground for RAM. It's a good clock speed that's able to run pretty stable in most motherboards. There's a little bit of scope for overclocking as well. I also wanted to have the RGB lighting on that as well to blend in with the case really nicely. It's exactly the same RAM that I've actually got in my other machine. I've been really happy with the way it performs, the way it overclocks and everything like that. So 32 gigabytes, perhaps a little bit overkill. You could probably get away with 16 gig, but again, I wanted to make sure that we were nice and future-proof and that we weren't going to run into any bottlenecks whatsoever. So those are the main core components of the system. We've got the Maximum 11 Hero, the AX1200i power supply, the Aorus Extreme GeForce RTX 2080 Ti graphics, the 9900K from Intel, as well as the Samsung 970 Pro SSD, and the Trident Z 3200 megahertz, 32 gig of RAM. So moving on to the rest of the components, we've got the Antec Torque case. Now, the reason why I chose that case specifically is because it looks cool for one. It gives the opportunity to build a really sort of extreme looking custom loop with all of the hard lines that we're going to be building in here. I also wanted something that was going to be open air because I want to keep the temperatures as low as is possible with my water loop. So anytime you have a sealed case, even if it's got relatively good airflow, it's always going to run a little bit hotter than you can get away with an open air case. And I wanted to make sure that for those really long gaming sessions or those endurance races and things like that, we were able to keep the temperatures as low as possible so we never run into any sort of throttling issues or anything like that. Now, on the subject of cooling as well, another reason why I chose this case is because it does fit 2 massive 360mm radiators. So we've chosen the EK Coolstream XE360 radiators from EK, and those are also 60mm thick as well. So with these radiators, we're going to have almost triple the cooling capacity that I had in my previous system. So we shouldn't ever see anything like runaway coolant temperatures. I'm expecting that we'll probably never even see temperatures on the coolant over about 30 degrees, despite the 2080 Ti obviously pumping out a lot more heat than the 1080 Ti did previously. Now, the custom loop that I have in my other system right now that's running the 8086K and the 2080 Ti that we're going to be putting in this machine, coolant temperatures are getting up to around sort of 38 degrees at the moment after about an hour of gaming. And that is sort of starting to push the upper limit of what you want for coolant temperature. So we're definitely starting to run into a little bit of a bottleneck there. So I wanted to make sure we are absolutely not going to have that problem with this build. Now, we've also got EK's Vada Evo RGB fans as well. Now, those are high static pressure fans as well, which is important when you're running them on radiators to make sure we've got the most efficient airflow as possible. They're also PWM controlled as well, which means we're able to vary the fan speed based off the temperature, the coolant temperature, CPU load, anything like that. It's all controlled from the motherboard. and that allows us to, have the minimum amount of noise, the most efficient cooling possible. Now, I actually already have another video on the channel, which I'll link above my head for you right now, where we covered how to set up PWM fans properly in your motherboard. So do check that out. We'll be covering it again for this build, but we probably won't go into quite the level of detail we did in that previous video. So I do recommend you check that out if you're looking at how to set up your PWM fans correctly. So while we're on the subject of cooling, I'll also quickly show you the reservoir as well. So a nice big tall reservoir, which is going to run pretty much right up the center of the case here in front of the radiators, and I'll show you all the layout and everything a little bit later on in the video series, but that should look really cool. It's also going to hold a lot more coolant as well, which means that will take longer to reach our maximum temperatures. Obviously, the more water that it's having to heat up, the longer it takes to sort of reach those peak temperatures. It doesn't change how hot the system gets overall, just means that it takes a little bit longer to reach there. So on the subject of coolant, we have 3 bottles of EK Cryofuel Solid Electric Purple Premix, and that should be hopefully enough to fill the system. The old system took about 1 liter, so I'm guessing that 3 liters should be about right for this. Now, this is actually the first time that I've used a solid color, and basically I just did it for visual appeal. I think it's going to look really cool in this system. Now, I have seen people have problems with solid colors before, so it's going to be an interesting test to see how the Cryofuel goes. It's a relatively new product from EK. I think that Jay's 2 Cents has been running a similar product in his Skunkworks machine for a couple of years now and hasn't had any problems. So hopefully I won't have any problems with this either, but we'll see how we go with that. So what else have we got here? Let me quickly get up here and we'll have a look. We've got our Velocity D RGB water block for our CPU as well. This is a really nice water block, and I'll give you a good look at that in detail a little bit later on. Obviously wanted to make sure we had a nickel water block to match with our nickel fittings, our copper radiators and things like that. We never want to mix an aluminium component in our loop with nickel or copper or anything like that, because that can cause all sorts of problems. So EK Velocity D RGB water block for that, and we'll definitely look at that in a lot more detail once we get into the building process. Leaning over again, we also have our EK X-Top Revo D5 RGB PWM sleeved pump as well, and that has got a really nice clear front. Again, I'll show you this in more detail once we get into building. It's going to sit sort of down in the bottom of the case. We obviously want to have the pump at the lowest point in the case inside the loop, and yeah, it should look really cool. I'm a little bit worried about how that might all fit inside the case, but we'll do some test fitting and all that sort of stuff a little bit later on. So we also have a vertical GPU riser bracket as well, and it's the same one that I used in the previous build, the Cooler Master Vertical Graphics Holder Kit. So that is going to mount basically just here, and we'll have a beautiful EK water block on our 2080 Ti on full display. We've also got a bunch of other little bits and pieces here. We've got a couple of RGB splitters from Cooler Master. We've got some UV lighting as well from CableMod that we'll be using to sort of make the die react and glow. We've also got our white sleeved cable from CableMod as well. Now, again, you don't need to go out and buy sleeved cables and lighting kits and all that sort of stuff to build a gaming PC. You can make it look nice and basic if you want to save some cash, but we want to try and make this look as cool as we possibly can. So in terms of other bits and pieces, we've got 5 more of the EK fans here as well. We want to have 6 fans in total, 1 for each slot on the radiators. We've got some mounting brackets. We've got some little anodized thumb screws as well for various bits and pieces. We've also got our EK HD PETG tubing as well, our hardline tubing, and we'll be covering that in a lot more detail later on when I show you how to bend the tubing and everything like that. There's some pretty good reasons why I've chosen PETG over acrylic, so we'll cover all of that in detail. We've got some cable combs here. We've also got a massive assortment of various different EK fittings, and I'm throwing stuff here now. But yeah, look, we'll cover all of that in detail once we start putting the water loop together. Okay, guys, so in the next video, we're going to be running through a bit more detail on the Antec torque case. There's a bunch of bits and pieces that I want to run you through on that case for those guys that might be looking at buying one of these for their own build. And yeah, from there, we'll get into doing some loop planning, figure out our layout, figure out where we're going to put the various different components. Then we can get to starting to install everything in the case, get all of our tubes bent, get everything built up and overclocked, run some benchmarks, and then we can put it to work. So guys, I really do hope that you find this video series entertaining and insightful. I don't think that I've ever seen a video video series that's going to cover a sim racing or gaming PC build in as much detail as we're going to cover in this series. And I do want to kind of try to keep this as organic as possible as well. So if you guys have any comments or questions at all, anything that you want to make sure that I cover in the videos, let me know in the comments. I do read every single comment. Jump in our Discord as well and have a discussion there. Let me know what you want to see. And yeah, let's make this as interesting and as useful as we possibly can for all those people out there that might be wanting to build a similar sort of system, or just looking at what sort of components they should be choosing for their own sim racing or gaming PC. So if you do want to purchase any of the equipment that you see in these videos, you can do so using the affiliate links in the description below. And basically the way that works is a small percentage of those sales goes back to helping out the channel. So I receive a small cut of the profit from those sales. Doesn't cost you anything more, but it goes a long way towards helping out the channel. And to be completely honest with you guys, that is what has funded all of the gear that you see in front of me here. So it's all completely funded by the channel, and I'm massively thankful to you guys for making that possible. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye.